In the bustling city of Fort Collins, Colorado, a shocking series of events unfolded, forever changing the lives of 3 women and 1 prominent doctor. A web of deceit, jealousy, and obsession spiraled out of control, culminating in a murder that left the community in shock. This is the story of Dr. Andrew Bennett, a brilliant, handsome, and intelligent 27-year-old physician whose life was tragically cut short in an affair that spiraled beyond his control. It was the spring of 2009 when Dr. Andrew Bennett, a charismatic and promising young doctor, found himself free from the chains of a toxic relationship that had drained him emotionally. For the past year, he had been entangled in a relationship with a woman who brought out the worst in him, leading to constant fights, mistrust, and manipulation. The relationship had taken a toll on him, leaving scars deeper than anyone could see. He walked away from it with a heavy heart, but was determined to focus on his career and leave behind the emotional baggage. Andrew had a bright future ahead as one of the most promising young doctors at a prestigious hospital in Fort Collins. His charm and intelligence set him apart from others, and his reputation among both colleagues and patients was rapidly growing. From a young age, Andrew had always been ambitious. His parents, who raised him in a middle-class family, had instilled in him a sense of hard work and dedication. Growing up, he watched his mother work long hours as a nurse, while his father juggled 2 jobs to support the family. Despite the struggles, they provided him with everything he needed to succeed. Andrew excelled in school, and by his early 20s, had become the first in his family to attend medical school. The long hours, endless studying, and grueling internships were all worth it when he finally earned the title of doctor. Now at 27, he was determined to continue rising through the ranks of the medical field. Despite his career success, Andrew was emotionally exhausted. The toxic relationship he had left behind drained him of the energy to engage in anything serious. He wanted freedom and enjoyment, not the weight of commitment. His focus shifted entirely to his work and enjoying life. So when his female patients began showing interest in him, Andrew welcomed the attention, relishing the distraction they provided from the loneliness he secretly felt. Emily Collins, a 20-year-old college student, was the first to catch his eye. Emily had always been a carefree and lively girl, growing up as the youngest in a family of 4. She was used to getting attention and thrived on it. She was studying literature at a local university, a passion that filled her with dreams of writing a novel someday. But an injury during a hiking trip in May 2009 brought her to Dr. Bennett's office. She had twisted her ankle and needed a quick checkup. Andrew, ever the professional, treated her, but something in the way he listened to her every word, his calm and reassuring demeanor, sparked an interest in her. It wasn't long before Emily found reasons to stay longer after her appointment, lingering with idle conversation. She felt a connection with him, one she hadn't felt with anyone else before. For her, Andrew was an escape from the routine of university life. He was older, wiser, and more mature than the boys she was used to. She wasn't looking for anything serious either, just the thrill of being with someone exciting. By mid-June, their relationship had blossomed into something carefree. They spent time together, enjoying the fleeting excitement of each other's company without the need for labels or expectations. While Andrew casually enjoyed his time with Emily, his life took another unexpected turn when he met Megan Foster, a 30-year-old single mother. Megan's life had been anything but easy. At 18, she had fallen in love with her high school sweetheart, believing they would build a life together. They married young, and soon after, she had a son. But things didn't go as planned. Her husband, charming when they first met, quickly became distant, focusing more on his work than his family. By the time their son was 5, the marriage had completely unraveled. Megan was left to raise her son alone, juggling work as a real estate agent and motherhood. Her days were long, and her nights were even longer. While she had friends, none of them truly understood the weight she carried as a single mother. Every decision she made was for her son. By 2009, her son was 8 years old, and though Megan had made a life for them, she felt an emptiness she tried to ignore. When she met Andrew in the summer of 2009, it wasn't under romantic circumstances. She had brought her son in for a routine checkup, and Andrew was his doctor. It had been a stressful day for her, and when Andrew spoke to her with such empathy, asking questions about her life and her son, Megan felt seen for the first time in a long time. Unlike Emily, who was carefree and young, Megan longed for stability. She wasn't looking for a casual fling, but hoped Andrew, with his intelligence and maturity, might be the man who could step into her life and fill the void. They began seeing each other more frequently, with Megan finding reasons to come by the hospital. She told herself it was nothing serious, that she was just enjoying the company. But deep down, she began to hope for more. By late August 2009, Megan had fallen deeply for Andrew. She saw him as the kind of man who could take care of her and her son, the kind of man with whom she could build a future. But Andrew, still healing from his own emotional wounds, wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. He continued to juggle his casual relationship with Emily and his deepening bond with Megan, unaware of the emotional turmoil that would soon follow. As the summer turned to fall, the lines between Andrew's relationships blurred. What began as a carefree fling with Emily and a deeper connection with Megan would soon become more complicated than Andrew had ever anticipated. The growing tension, jealousy, and unspoken expectations would ultimately set the stage for the tragedy that none of them could foresee. In the spring of 2010, Andrew's life, which had once seemed so exciting and free, took an unexpected and dangerous turn. It was the season when he met Lauren Brooks, a woman who would unknowingly drag him into a whirlpool of obsession and destruction. Lauren, 25 years old, had recently married Eric Brooks, a successful businessman. From the outside, their marriage seemed perfect. Lauren, a beautiful and poised woman from an influential family, and Eric, a well-known and respected figure in the business world. However, beneath the surface, their marriage was strained, held together by nothing more than social expectations and appearances. Eric, distant and emotionally unavailable, spent more time in boardrooms than with his wife. Feeling increasingly isolated, Lauren sought comfort elsewhere. When Lauren first walked into Andrew's office for a routine checkup in April 2010, the chemistry between them was instantaneous. There was something magnetic about Andrew that drew her in. He was young, confident, and gave her the attention she craved but lacked at home. Andrew, still in his casual phase, saw no harm in flirting with her. Unaware of her marriage, they began spending time together. What started as a few innocent appointments turned into something much more intimate. Meanwhile, Megan was not handling things well. By the summer of 2010, she had already developed a strong emotional attachment to Andrew. She thought of him as more than just a passing fling. In her mind, Andrew could be the one who would finally give her the life she had longed for, a stable home for her and her son. When she noticed that Andrew had been spending time with Lauren, Megan's world began to crumble. Unlike Emily, who remained detached and indifferent to Andrew's other relationships, Megan felt a deep sense of betrayal. She couldn't understand why Andrew would be interested in someone else when he had her. In July 2010, Megan confronted Andrew. She told him that she knew about Lauren, and the mere mention of her name caused a shift in their relationship. Megan didn't care to hide her jealousy or her emotions. However, Andrew, still thinking that things between him and Lauren were casual, brushed Megan's concerns aside. He told her that there was nothing serious between him and Lauren, that he didn't even know she was married, and that Megan had nothing to worry about. But Megan could see through him. Every time Andrew dismissed her feelings, the sense of betrayal grew stronger. She could feel him slipping away and her hold on him weakening. By the end of 2010, Andrew was more involved with Lauren than he had ever planned to be. The thrill of the affair excited him, and Lauren's charm made it easy to overlook the potential consequences. Lauren, despite being married, had no intention of ending things with Andrew either. She found in him what she couldn't find at home: passion, attention, and escape from her emotionally vacant marriage. Meanwhile, Eric, oblivious to the affair, continued with his life, as too caught up in his work to notice the cracks forming in his relationship. By August 2011, Megan's frustration had reached a breaking point. She had spent more than a year watching Andrew drift further away from her, losing the emotional connection she had desperately tried to build. It was at a hospital charity event in early August that things took a dark turn. Megan saw Andrew and Lauren together, laughing and looking like they belonged to a world that didn't include her. That moment solidified her fears, and she knew she needed to do something about it. Driven by jealousy, Megan began investigating Lauren's life. She discovered that Lauren was not just a random woman. She was married to Eric Brooks, a man with deep connections in the business world and the local community. Lauren's marriage wasn't just a small detail. It was a secret that could destroy not only Andrew, but also Lauren's entire life. Megan now had the power to expose the affair, and she intended to use it. By late August, Megan sent an anonymous email to Eric. The message was brief but direct, revealing everything about Lauren's ongoing affair with Andrew. The words hit Eric like a sledgehammer. He had suspected that something was off in his marriage, but he had never imagined the extent of Lauren's betrayal. Eric spiraled into depression, his mind consumed with thoughts of revenge. His life, which had been neatly arranged, now felt like it was crumbling around him. He withdrew from his work, avoided his friends, and spent hours alone, consumed by the thought that Andrew had destroyed his marriage. While Eric was slipping into a dark emotional state, Lauren's life began to unravel as well. Eric confronted her about the affair, and although she tried to deny it at first, the weight of guilt overwhelmed her. Their marriage, already hanging by a thread, collapsed under the pressure of the truth. Lauren, once poised and composed, found herself trapped between two men, one she had vowed to love, and the other who had made her feel alive again. But now it was all slipping away. On March 6, 2012, everything came crashing down. Dr. Andrew Bennett was found dead in his home. The scene was horrific. He had been brutally stabbed multiple times, his body lying in a pool of blood in the living room. The crime scene showed signs of a struggle, indicating that Andrew had tried to fight off his attacker, but the assault had been too violent. The police, arriving at the scene early that morning, immediately began piecing together the details. The next day, March 8, 2012, the police questioned both Megan and Lauren. Lauren was in shock, barely able to process the news of Andrew's murder. She denied any involvement, though her guilt over the affair was apparent. Megan, on the other hand, was noticeably erratic. Her emotions fluctuated between sadness and anger, and the police couldn't ignore how unsettled she seemed. However, neither woman could provide any concrete evidence that linked them to the murder. As the investigation unfolded, the police turned their attention to Eric Brooks. Eric appeared cooperative at first, showing the expected signs of grief and confusion. But as the police dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. In the weeks leading up to Andrew's murder, Andrew had received threatening phone calls and messages. The tone of the messages was aggressive, warning him to stay away from certain people. The calls, traced back to Eric, placed him as the prime suspect. The discovery of these messages painted a clear picture of Eric's mental state. He had descended into madness, consumed by the idea that Andrew had destroyed his life. His obsession with revenge had grown over time, until it led him to Andrew's doorstep on the night of March 6th, where he committed the ultimate act of violence. What had started as a carefree affair had now ended in bloodshed, leaving behind broken lives and a shattered community. The investigation was far from over, but the police knew they were closing in on the truth, a truth that would expose the dark depths of human obsession, jealousy, and betrayal. On March 20th, 2012, the investigation reached its climax. After weeks of gathering evidence and chasing down every lead, the police finally had what they needed to arrest Eric Brooks. They had suspected his involvement from the moment they uncovered the threatening messages and late-night calls directed at Andrew. But it wasn't until they found Eric's fingerprints on the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, that their suspicions were confirmed. It had taken meticulous work, but the pieces were finally falling into place. When the police arrived at Eric's home that morning, the atmosphere was tense. Eric had been living in a state of emotional turmoil for months, isolated from his work and friends, consumed by thoughts of betrayal and revenge. His once orderly life had crumbled into chaos after learning about Lauren's affair, and the murder of Andrew had been the breaking point. He offered little resistance when the police arrived at his door, his face hollow from weeks of sleepless nights and despair. During the interrogation, Eric confessed to the murder, but his confession wasn't as straightforward as the police had expected. While he admitted to killing Andrew, the details he provided shocked everyone. Eric claimed that he hadn't acted alone, that he had been pushed into committing the crime by Megan Foster. According to Eric, it was Megan's jealousy and resentment toward Andrew that had driven him to kill. He alleged that Megan had called him repeatedly in the weeks leading up to the murder, reminding him of Andrew's betrayal and urging him to take action. In his mind, Megan had planted the seeds of revenge, constantly feeding his anger until he felt he had no choice but to make Andrew pay for what he had done. Eric described how each call from Megan had intensified his hatred for Andrew. She had painted Andrew as the villain, the man who had destroyed both their lives. Eric, already fragile from the collapse of his marriage, began to believe that Megan was right. His rage and jealousy consumed him, pushing him to the brink, and on March 6, 2012, that rage exploded into violence. He had gone to Andrew's house, fueled by a mixture of pain and anger, and in a fit of uncontrollable emotion, he had stabbed him. Eric's confession, however, wasn't enough to implicate Megan. Despite his claims that she had orchestrated the murder, there was no solid evidence linking her directly to the crime. The police had searched Megan's phone records and questioned her extensively, but they found nothing that could definitively prove she had encouraged Eric to kill Andrew. She denied everything, insisting that while she had been heartbroken and angry about Andrew's affair, she had never urged Eric to commit such an act. By the time Eric's confession was complete, the police were left with a tangled web of accusations and half-truths. While they had enough to charge Eric with the murder, Megan's involvement remained uncertain. Was Eric telling the truth, or was he trying to shift the blame for his own actions? The investigation had reached a critical point, but the answers were still elusive. By July 2013, Eric's case went to trial. The courtroom was packed with the media and local community, eagerly following every development. The murder of Dr. Andrew Bennett, a beloved figure in Fort Collins, had shocked the city, and the revelation that his death had been the result of a sordid affair involving 3 different women made the case even more sensational. Everyone wanted to know how the trial would unfold, who would be held accountable, and whether Megan Foster, whose name had been dragged through the mud, would face charges of her own. The prosecution, led by a seasoned attorney, painted Eric as a man driven to madness by the betrayal of his wife. They presented him as a once successful businessman whose world had been shattered by the affair, leaving him emotionally unhinged. The evidence was damning. Eric's fingerprints on the murder weapon, the threatening messages to Andrew, and his own confession left little room for doubt. The prosecution's argument was simple. Eric had acted out of jealousy and rage, unable to cope with the destruction of his marriage. However, Eric's defense team took a different approach. They pushed the narrative that Megan had manipulated Eric into committing the murder. They argued that Megan, consumed by her own jealousy over Andrew's relationship with Lauren, had used Eric as a pawn to exact her revenge. They highlighted Eric's fragile mental state, claiming that he had been vulnerable and easily influenced by Megan's bitterness. The defense painted Megan as a woman scorned, someone who couldn't bear to see Andrew with anyone else and who had found a way to eliminate him without getting her own hands dirty. Throughout the trial, Megan's life was placed under intense scrutiny. Every detail of her relationship with Andrew was dissected, her emotions and actions questioned at every turn. Although she continued to deny any involvement in the murder, the accusations had left her reputation in tatters. The media portrayed her as the other woman, a manipulative force behind the scenes who had orchestrated the entire tragedy. Even though there was no concrete evidence against her, the whispers of her guilt lingered in the public consciousness. The emotional toll of the trial was immense. Eric, who had once been a respected businessman, sat in the courtroom looking defeated, his life in ruins. Lauren, whose affair had set the entire chain of events into motion, was also present, though her relationship with Eric had long since ended. She too grappled with the guilt of what her actions had caused. And Megan, the woman at the center of the defense's argument, struggled to maintain her composure as her name was dragged through the mud. In September 2013, after weeks of testimony and cross-examination, the jury reached its verdict. Eric was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The weight of the sentence was crushing, but it was the inevitable outcome for a man who had taken another's life in a fit of rage. While Eric's fate was sealed, Megan's story was far from over. Though she was not convicted of the murder, she faced a separate trial for charges of incitement, accused of pushing Eric to commit the crime. The trial that followed was long and grueling, with Megan continuing to maintain her innocence. She insisted that while she had been angry and hurt by Andrew's betrayal, she had never wanted him dead. However, the damage to Megan's life had already been done. The accusations alone had destroyed her reputation, leaving her ostracized by friends and family. Even if she were to walk free, her life would never return to what it had been before. The trial had exposed the darkest corners of human emotion, jealousy, obsession, and betrayal, and had left a permanent scar on everyone involved. In the end, Eric's actions had taken not only Andrew's life, but also his own, while Megan was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. The once promising doctor, whose charm had captivated so many, became a tragic figure in a story of obsession that would haunt the community for years to come. The community of Fort Collins was left reeling by the events that transpired. Dr. Andrew Bennett, once admired for his skill and charm, became a tragic figure in a story of obsession and betrayal. Lauren, whose affair had set these events in motion, divorced Eric and moved away to start anew, though she was haunted by the guilt of what her actions had set into motion. Megan, once a hopeful single mother looking for love, now faced years behind bars for her role in the tragedy. The tale of love, lust, and deadly obsession remained a cautionary story for years, leaving everyone to wonder what dark thoughts drove Eric and Megan, and if it could have been prevented.